that she joins us today. She's a researcher at ESPOL in Ecuador, and she coordinates the research group of teaching and learning technologies at the Information Technology Center there. She's also part of the LAA project, which stands for Learning Analytics in Latin America. So I really like the abbreviation, and I'm happy she's here to promote this community. And she will share her insights and experience today with us with 3 case studies of how learning analytics were implemented at 3 different universities in Latin America. So a very exciting topic, I think. So Margarita, please take the floor, and I look forward to your presentation.
Where's Margarita?
We still have her here.
Oh, what happened?
Teams connection problems, but I'm connected. I'm texting her.
Oh, let's
short and brief.
Okay, we have a bit of a problem there. Where is our speaker?
Hi, I don't know what happened with my computer. It's like, we're about to start, and then everything froze.
Okay, let's go. Let's try again.
The floor is all yours.
Okay, let me share my screen. Give me one moment. Oh no, I need permission to share my screen.
Yes, you should be now able now.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Yes.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start. Okay, so hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time zone. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm here to share the experience of implementing an academic counseling system and adaptation from a European counseling, academic counseling system to in Latin America. So just to give you some context, this is the experience of an ongoing project. It's called the LAA project. It's an Erasmus Plus project. There is something in the chat. I don't know if that's okay. This was the first time. Okay. So this is an Erasmus Plus project which aims at developing capacity in Latin American universities to use learning analytics. And in this ongoing project, we are participating with Latin American and European partners from, in the case of Latin America, we have 2 universities from Ecuador, ESPOL, the university where I work, and Universidad de Cuenca. And then we also have universities from Chile, the Pontificia Universidad Católica and Universidad Austral. And our European partners are from Universidad Carlos III in Madrid, KU Leuven, and the University of Edinburgh. So this is the result of something that we are currently working. And just in case we have this clear. And just to give you some context, although we work with 4 universities, the experience that I'm going to be sharing, it's focused on 3 universities, the university, 1 in Chile and the 2 in Ecuador. So just to give you some general information about these universities, as you notice, they have different contexts. I mean, one is private, the others are public. The foundation date is different. The number of students are kind of similar. And something that we do have in common is that our curriculum structure, it's a fixed curriculum, which means, and I'm going to show you a picture, which means that every time students are enrolled in any subject, they have these curriculum paths that they have to take. in order to graduate. So this is by semester. So the 3 universities share that in common. So, and another aspect which I will elaborate later on, that we consider that it's extremely important, is the learning analytics maturity level. So for instance, in the case of SPOL, currently we are already using a learning analytics tool. We already have a counseling system. We've been using it since 2013. So we already have a tool and we already have some policies. So teachers and students know in what moments they have to have counseling sessions. But that's our situation. In the case of Universidad de Cuenca, they had not counseling system before, not any learning analytic tool. And of course, there were not policies related to the use of this tool. But in the situation of Universidad Austral, although they did not have any learning analytic tool, there were already some policies. So there was already something going on at the department level that the program coordinators have to, every semester, they have to decide which student, if he wanted to change from a different career, they had to, get all this information from the different systems. So there was already some policy going on, but not a tool. So as you can see, we have different contexts, and these things will affect the adoption or the adaptation of the learning analytic tool that I will talk about. So my presentation is going to be divided in 3 parts. First, I will tell you about the need, why we decided to go for an academic counseling system. Then I will explain the adaptation and implementation process. And finally, I will focus on the lessons learned from all this experience. So let's talk about first the need. And with this, I will focus, or I will talk about the LAA Framework. In the project, we have something called LAA Framework, which is the main purpose is to guide higher education institutions in Latin America to design, implement, and adopt learning analytic tools. So this document that we have developed starts from scratch. So if you are a rector or you're a researcher or a teacher that is interested in learning analytics but would like to start, implementing something, what will be the first step? What is the first thing I can do? So with this document that is called the LAA Framework, it will guide you step by step on how to start working on this. This framework has 4 different dimensions: institutional, technological, ethical, and communal. And you can take these in different order depending on the maturity of your institution, and you can take them in order. So for instance, the 3 universities from this experience, we all did this. We specifically focus on the institutional, the first part, to develop the need. We had the institutional and the ethical part. And these 2, and I'm going to show you an example, has different steps in order to first gather information from the different stakeholders, from teachers, from students, from institutional leaders. So what is the current situation of learning analytics in the institution? At an institutional level, but also from ethical related aspects such as privacy. So we ask teachers and students whether they are aware of what they're using, how they're using their data, if they're asking for permission. And we, in order to do this manual, this framework, we also built on the Sheila project, which is also an Erasmus Plus project. And it's similar to LAA, but it's the European version, if we might say it. And they also have all these instruments to gather information, so we adapted. So for instance, one major change is that we noticed that in the Sheila project, in order to ask this type of questions to find out, the needs in the institution, they start talking about, what are the learning analytics, how are people using learning analytics in your institution, or what would other needs would be. So even the term, we could not use it in Latin America because people are not aware or they don't use this term. So we had to change, instead of using the term learning analytics, we change it to academic data. So we start asking questions like, okay, how is the academic data used in your university? what other information do you think would be important? So that's one of the things of adapting to our context, in this case, Latin America. So I'm going to show you, for instance, the different steps that the institutional and ethical level have. So this is the institutional dimension. So as you see, it guides you, has different phases, and when you have the chance to get to look at this document, it even shows you the instruments, it tells you how to apply the instruments, it gives you all the information that you need, again, if you would like to start using learning analytics in your institution. So, for instance, we all did the LAA Canvas when we had this overall view of from the different stakeholders on what was going on in the institution. Then we had to do phase 2 and phase 3, where, as I mentioned before, we gather information through interviews to leaders, professors, and students, and also surveys to students and professors. As for the ethical dimension, we first had to find out what were the national and international regulations in terms of data and privacy. So, for instance, in Ecuador, they're still discussing about this in the government. We don't have regulations for data privacy issues. Whereas in Chile, there is already something going on. So in order to start applying, first we have to find out the situation in our country and specifically in our institutions. And we also had to do some interviews and surveys. So actually these were part of the institutional dimensions, so they were combined, so we wouldn't overwhelm teachers and professors with too many questions. So once we gather all this information, we proceed to after 37 interviews with managers, 16 focus groups, and 1,884 students who participated in the survey, and 368 teaching staff. And of course, I'm considering the 4 institutions, not only the 3. We found out the different needs from the different stakeholders. So the type of questions that we asked were designed in a way that we could later on triangulate this information. So we asked the same questions or similar questions to teachers, institutional leaders, and professors, and then we could see if they agree or not. So the initial results were that first, from the point of view of students need quality feedback and timely support. From the point of view of teachers staff need timely alerts and meaningful performance evaluations. And from the point of view of managers, they need quality information to implement support interventions. So we now are able to make decisions because we first gathered information and now we know what to do. Since we have to frame these results to our project, and one of the results is that we had to design an academic counseling system, we have to then focus on the students' needs. So students need some quality feedback that will help them take, make better decisions when it comes to designing what upcoming courses to take. And if that helps that they reduce dropout or failing rates because they're aware of the decisions that they make, then we went through that direction. And those are, and that's why we ended up designing an academic counseling system. So for the people who don't know what happens in these situations, in these moments, the idea is that every semester there is this conversation with the counselor or the teacher and the students when they have to decide, for instance, what courses they should take for the upcoming semester, what is their current situation. Maybe they want to tell some personal issues that might be affecting their learning performance. So this is a moment when teachers and students talk, and then they help them, the teachers help them decide making better decisions. So what usually happens if there is no tool that helping see is that a student might say, okay, I want to take this subject next semester, so what do you think? So the teacher might say, yeah, when I was a student, these ones were difficult. You should take this or this, but they are not really based on data. They're just based on their previous experience. So it's most likely that, the nature of the subject changed when the teacher was a student and now. So if we're able to provide something, a dashboard that they could see students' performance throughout the different semesters, they could see the students' performance in certain subjects, then the teachers would be able or should be able to make some better decisions, because now they will be based on data. So that was the purpose of designing this. If I go back for the moment, just in case to finish about the LAA framework, then I mentioned that we did all the universities did the institutional and ethical one. I will also focus on the communal one, just in case. This one talks about joining the community, the LAA community. Actually, if you want to go from this direction, it's in the moment that you're already doing something, research and learning analytics in Latin America, but now what's the next step? How do I disseminate this information or my research? Or how do I know what other institutions are doing? So then you go and you take this one, and they will explain the steps to be part of this LAA community, okay? So I'll go back and finish this. So once we have this, then we skip, and now we were ready to jump to the technological dimension. So as I mentioned before, all the 3 universities were in the same path. We all gathered the same instruments, we did the same thing. Here in the technological dimensions, then we see some difference. So what happens? In this dimension, the manual, the LAA framework says, okay, so first you have to obtain requirements. So you already know that you want a counseling system, an academic counseling system. So now you need to get some requirements from the main stakeholders. Then in the phase 2, consider all these technical considerations, such as the language, computer language where you would use it, the amount of people, budget, so all these things. And then, of course, once you have it, please do some testing to make sure that it works. So so that's what it says. So you have these different steps. And here, we took separate ways, if we want to call it. So what happens here? So now we have to first select what would be the counseling system that we would use or that we would build on in order to start adapting. So since this was a capacity building project, we built on the experience of our European partners. So let me show you. This is Lisa. I don't know if you know it, but this is a counseling system, an academic counseling system that is used in KU Leuven. As you can see, they use it with first-year students because they realize that in their context, the students that need support the most are the ones that are in this first year. So the dashboard looks like this. You have some the grades from pre-university tests and from the different test subjects that they take in the different terms. And you also see, for instance, that they could manipulate the planning part, and based on the subjects that you take or based on the credits that you take, it tells you how many, in how many years it would take you to actually finish it, because it compares you to the students who have taken the same decision. And on the upper part, it also shows you your position compared to other students. So this is a particular situation that they use it. Actually, teachers do not use it. They have special trained people, counselors, in order to conduct this type of, to use this tool with students. So here we have this type of context. Now, how does that look in our situation? I'm going to show you first what Universidad Austral did. So keep that in mind. This is what they did. So you see, it kind of have a similar structure. And I have a question. I don't know if I can stop for a moment. Let me see. Okay. There is some internet problem. Okay, so this is how it looks like from Universidad de Chile, from Universidad Austral. So you have the curriculum path, as I showed you earlier. You have per semester, the type, the colors are aligned whether the students pass. If you click on any of these subjects, you can see further information on the grade of the student. And you also have the student's trajectory throughout the different semesters. So this is a dashboard that they adapted. In order to do this, they use a Scrum to gather user requirements. So something that I need to emphasize is that the technical dimension mentions that everything has to be user-focused. So the best way to design a dashboard is that we need to ask stakeholders what they want, what they need to see, what they expect to see in a dashboard in order to make better decisions. So it's something that independently of the kind of system to gather requirements, the methodology to gather requirements, we have to focus on the user. So as you see, kind of looks similar, but it's not the same, okay? Now, what happens in the situation of Universidad de Cuenca? Let's remember that this university, in the case of Universidad de Cuenca, no experience in learning analytics, no policies, and wait, okay? So this is a dashboard that Universidad de Cuenca developed. As you see, it's actually similar to Universidad Austral because we work together in order to make we have the same fixed curriculum. That's why it was easier for us to do this. And you see that they changed in a way the colors, they added more information. They also have trajectories on the part B, but then they added more information, such as they wanted to see visually, be able to see this information of the amount of subjects that the student has taken, so it has further information. And here, for instance, they make some kind of division. If on part B, if you click on planning, then it changes and then it shows you only the subjects that you have available to take for the upcoming semester. Now, something that it's important to point out is that when we gather all this information from the previous part, we ask stakeholders whether they agree on comparing. What was their belief or their perception about comparing yourself with others? So if you notice, actually, KU Leuven does this. It shows how the student is doing compared to others. So we wanted to ask a perception of, if we want to do the same in our situation. So, for instance, here, they had some problems. In their university, they said, no, we don't want that because it will affect students' self-esteem, motivation. So we don't like, or we would not like to see how the student is. Even though this dashboard is aimed for teachers, that we wouldn't want to see that information. So that was something that they decided to remove it. But then they added something optional. They have like a button where it says, okay, if you want to see how the student is doing comparing to others, you can click. Otherwise, you cannot see that information. So that's something that you take into consideration from the context, that it doesn't work in their situation. And even the way that they gather information, requirements from users was different. For instance, in the moment that the first time they had to approach the teachers and the program coordinators to see, look, this is an academic counseling system. These are the parts. they first need to show something. They could not just gather people and say, okay, so we want to create this. What do you think the data we need to build it? So it didn't work that way. So people are very visual. So actually, the first approach from Universidad de Cuenca to gather requirements was to build a mock-up of what a dashboard looks like. And then based on that information, you know, the coordinator from these institutions said, okay, so this is a dashboard. This is how a counseling system, academic counseling system looks like. Look at all this information. It has different parts. So now tell me, do you like the information that is here? What other information do we need? And this is how they approach people to gather requirements. And this is something that we also publish something in order to see this difference when there is an institution that does not have any previous experience comparing to the one that has some experience with a learning analytics tool. This is something that we actually in SPOL, we did it later on because it's something that we actually shared to our partners in Cuenca so that they could use it. This is something that we did, but later on. In our situation, for instance, we in SPOL, since we already had a counseling system, what we did was to simply ask a survey to all teachers to say, okay, look, we want to make some improvements. Tell us what the current, your perception, what are the aspects of the system that you like, and now tell us what additional information you think we should still provide. So it was a completely different approach. We didn't need to show this mock-up in the first time. So once we gathered all this information, what we actually did is we wrote down all the different things that they wanted. We put them in different papers. And then we say, okay, so they want information regarding this, and this, and this, and this. And after we have this, then we design the mock-up. And that was easier for us now to have a better idea of how our dashboard or the new version of our system would look like. But we went beyond that. When designing a dashboard that, because it's really visual, it is not only about the parts that it would have or the sections or the modules that we would have, but then also what would be the best way to visualize all these different panels. So when we started gathering more specific information, we did something like this. I know that it's in Spanish, but I can translate it. So we say, okay, so you want something that you could compare the student to other students. So we gave different options of visualizations, and we asked teachers, so in which semester then the student got a better grade. So they were able to answer the questions, and then we did some follow-up questions to say, okay, so which of these three types of visualizations help you understand this information better? So option 1, option 2, or option 3. And then based on that information, we decided that our dashboard would have this section, but this specific type of visualization because most teachers understood it in this way. Okay. Now, in the case of the adaptation process in SPOL, as I mentioned before, we already have not only a dashboard, but a complete system for counseling. So it looks something like this. Actually, it's long. What I did is cutting this in half. So you have, for instance, personal information, then you have the trajectory, you also have credits taken, but you even have more information such as if the student is already doing some training, like in jobs where they have to do some training there, so they have to write down that information. And it goes beyond only academic because we have a special section where if we notice that our students are having problems like personal, financial, medical issues, we could click here on one part and then we could send this information to the student wellness, the student welfare department, and then they could take care. So we derive students to, I don't know, the psychologists. They are the ones who decide that. So you see, it's more complex. And the system also has different like sections. So if you click, for instance, on the first one, that's curriculum path, it will show you something that our previous partners have. They have this map when it shows you how the students are doing, which subjects they have taken. Now, the problem in our situation is that we wanted to do the same thing. We wanted to have our system not like this, but we wanted to show it like our partners in Universidad de Chile, in Austral, or Universidad de Cuenca. Our problem was more technical because it turns out we did not have the code when students change from one subject to another through different curriculums. Somehow the university does not have that information stored. So if they don't have that information stored, it's difficult for us to make these connections and to create a dashboard that would look like this. So we could not do it. So instead, we decided to improve other panels that this system has. For instance, another section that this system has, it's called academic history. So in the past, or the previous version, as you see here, it only shows you a table. So you have to click next, next, next every time you wanted to see more information. And they say, okay, this is the year, the subjects that you have taken, the grade point average in each one, the status, whether you fail or pass, who was the teacher, and the grade. So we noticed that it was too plain, that it did not provide, a whole view of how the student was doing. So we decided to change this table, and once we added all the requirements, then it looked something like this. So now, the moment that you click, then you can see, okay, this student in the first semester took all these different type of subjects, and you can see whether the student easily see whether the student failed or passed, and all these codes that you can see is something that the university already uses, so we just adapted to this system. So for teachers now, it was easier for them to, when they had to have a conversation and say, okay, so let's see how you did last semester. And then they can say, okay, so I see that you're failing in this specific subject, and then they could have, they could take better decisions. And if you click on any of them, it will give you more information. So for instance, you could see how the student is doing in his grade comparing to his friends in the same course. But if you click on this other button, you can also see how the student is doing comparing to the subject that was open during that semester in different courses. So sometimes when we have this conversation with our students, they said, no, the teacher was terrible. Everybody failed in this class. But then you see sometimes that it was something specific with the student, but then the subject, it was not really difficult, because then when you click on this other option, all the classes had a good grade. So then what happened? And then you start asking more information to students about this. And if we go back to our original system, we also made a major improvement in the planning section. So this is very critical in our university. Before the semester begins, they have, and before registration, they have this counseling session, 15 minutes with students and teachers. And one major goal in this session is to advise which subjects to take. So in the past, when they click on the upcoming subject, it will also show you just a table that says, okay, you have only these subjects available, no more information. So as I was saying in the beginning, as a teacher, how can you provide recommendations if you only have a table with a list of subjects? So we changed that, and now when teachers click on that option, they see something like this. Now they're able to see, according to the semester where they are, which subjects on the left side, when it says level 400, you can still see now what subject the student still has to take, even though you don't have the visualization of the curriculum path as we wanted, but it kind of helps. But now, depending on the subject that the student is interested in taking, you can see now the workload, which is something that we realize that students are taking too many subjects. That's why they're failing. So we wanted teachers and students to be able to see this information. So now, every time they take these subjects, they see, okay, so this is the amount of time it would take you from theoretical part, autonomous work, practical hours, and then on this other part, you see now overall, it would take you from 40 hours a week, it would take you 30 hours. And then you can start asking more questions, because then you say, okay, so are you working? So if you're working, consider that you won't have time to do this. And we even went further, it doesn't show here, we even went further, and we were able to also visualize the difficulty level. We calculated the difficulty level of the subject, so that it was not only about the workload, but it was also about how difficult it was. And again, the idea is that with all this information, then teachers would give better advice to students. And we do have that information. We already compared how did it go to the semester in 2018, when they did not have these visualizations, compared to 2019, when they actually now had the chance to see. And our results show that they listen more now to the counselor. So we have the subjects that the teachers recommended versus the subjects that the student actually enrolled, and there is now they listen more to the counselors, which is a good indicator that this is actually working. We cannot say, we cannot compare really academic performance, because even if we found that students improve their academic performance, it's really difficult to see that, to conclude that it's because of this new visualization that the students actually did it. We know that there are different aspects why students would improve or not their academic performance. And the last improvement that we did is that we also included a predictive module, a dropout, but then we changed it. It was not a dropout, but now it's more a retention module, where a teacher can see how the student is going. And you see, first, this is the level of retention in the career, in the study program. You see it's medium. And if the teacher clicks on this information, then they can see what were the variables that we took into consideration to jump to this conclusion. And then we ask teachers whether they agree or not on this information. This is something additional that we also included in our system. So as you can see, it's not, in the case of a SPOL, it's not just a dashboard that we have. It's a very complex system. We actually, in a way, we kind of separated the dashboard and we put it in different sections in our system, so it looks different. Because again, it has a different purpose. We already have some information. In the case of Cuenca or Chile, they have not included any personal information yet, because they are in the first level of just getting academic data. But in our case, our teachers now demanded more information. So you see how the different needs affect the way these dashboards are going to look like, although we all started from the same idea. So to conclude, if I say what were the lessons learned from this experience, that's one size fits all. No, it definitely it doesn't. No, it doesn't because you have to consider needs. You have to consider stakeholders, the technical aspects, like the example that we had in Expol. But we also have to consider two things that I mentioned in the previous slide: the leadership processes and the organizational maturity. Something that we did is that we compare these two aspects, and there was a main difference here. So on the organizational maturity level, let me see because I have a chat here. Yes, I can send this. I think they're gonna be in the website. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So you see, we have the organizational maturity level. This is something that we built on okay, so we built on, I don't remember the name right now. Yeah, okay, I don't remember right now. Siemens, yeah, I remember it was based on Siemens. So we have different levels. Awareness, if it's their interest in user learning analytics, they know that it's important. If it's experimentation, then you're in a level where they're already doing some piloting at a small scale. If you're at a department adoption level, it means that you're already doing in your faculty some, you're already working on this at a faculty level. If it's institutional, it means that you're already using as a whole scale, but then if it's institutional transformation, it means that the data that this system is providing is helping you to make better decisions. So that's on the organizational maturity. But if you see on the other side, you have the leadership process. It does affect if it's bottom up or top down. What we mean by top down is that the decision to implement a learning analytic tool comes from the authorities, okay, and it goes down to the final user, which can be the teachers. But at the other side, it would be that the need comes from students or teachers, and then it goes up to the authorities to have the support. So when we make this comparison of the situation of the 3 universities, well, in this case, it were the 4 universities, but I will focus only on 3. This is how our situation looked like. So as you see, for instance, in Expol, in my university, it was more like a top-down situation, decision, a process, because the vice rector agreed on doing this. They gave us all the support, and although we gathered information from the different stakeholders, it was their major, the major decision came from them. So the moment that we actually scaled down all these to teachers, not everybody took it in a good way. They said that it was a lot of information. It's going to take you more than 15 minutes to do this. Then they have to give us more time. So not everybody took it right. And this is a nice example of top-down decisions. But if you consider the organizational maturity level, we are at a level where we are institutional adoption and institutional transformation. So we are on this side. And yeah, okay. So we are on this side. And then you can see how now we're making better decisions. Now we're actually analyzing the data that this system has provided for so many years. And now we're saying, okay, so this is the path that we're going to take, so little by little. But if you consider for instance, Universidad de Cuenca, they are at the awareness process. So the authorities are aware that learning analytics is important, that they help them, but they're still at awareness level. But then something that Universidad de Cuenca and Universidad Austral shared is that the leadership process was a combination of bottom up and top down, and it really made a difference because you have support from teachers, support from the authorities, and the implementation was better compared to the problems that we had in Expol. In this situation, for us organizational maturity, you see that UAS is a little bit ahead because they are at the department adoption level, so they are already doing something in the department. So again, if I go back to the conclusion, please consider all these aspects for any implementation. I don't think only in Latin America, but in anywhere, if you want to adapt some learning analytics tools. So consider the leadership process, organizational maturity, needs stakeholders, and technical aspects. So I guess that's it. Oh, before I finish, thank you very much. Just in case, if you have some Spanish-speaking colleagues, we have an upcoming, I'm doing some advertising, I'm sorry. We have some, the third conference in learning analytics in Latin America. It's going to be virtual, it's going to be in October, so you have information about this in the project website. And if you want to follow the community, the LAA community on Twitter, you could also have this information. And this is my personal information for my email and my Twitter account. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Margarita, for your presentation. And now we have some time for questions and answers for Q&A. So anyone who has a question can raise their hand, can click in the raise hand button, and I can unmute you, or also can write down both in the chat or in the Q&A button so we read your questions out loud. So there's no questions yet in the Q&A box, but in the chat there are some comments. So there were some doubts about the webinar, and actually, yeah, people will share with you, like we as the organizer SOLA will share with you the recording of this presentation for people that were asking about the slides. Okay, so there is a question here from Irma, and it's about the dashboard. So it will be released as an open source, Margarita?
Yes, yes, yes. Everything, actually it's already available. If you go to the project website, there is a part, I don't know if I can show you right now, let me see. If you go to the project website, just give me a moment, okay? If you click on results, you have this in Spanish and English, just in case. We have some demo versions, actually, if you want to play with them, but even in the deliverables. So it's part of, I'm having some, okay. So these are, if you want to have access, for instance, to the LAA framework, and as I mentioned before, all the different steps and the instruments to gather this information, you can click and you get all this. Here you have the design for learning analytics tools, and you have the source code. So everything is available. Okay.
Great. So there is other questions. I'm gonna join these two. So Titi asked, like, how did you decide about academic counseling and plan feedback in terms of the process that you wanted to target? And also Helen asked about, like, the impact of using this academic counseling data on student evaluations and grades. So first, how you decided to approach or to target academic counseling, and then if you have evaluated the results of using learning analytics in this process yet or not.
Okay, as for the first question, since we were working as part of the project, one of the outcomes is that we have to design some a learning and an academic counseling system. So when we gather all this information from the different stakeholders, and as I show you in the first slide, it says, okay, students need some feedback, timely feedback. So we decided to frame all these needs into, and adapt it to the needs that we have in this project. So we have to create counseling systems. Okay, so let's try to, address this issue that students need some feedback in a way that it will be aligned to the system, to the results of something that we have to show in this project. Now, you might be asking, okay, if it says that students need timely feedback, why you decided to do like a counseling system, an academic counseling system for teachers? Why not just aim for students directly if it's their need, not the teacher's need? Well, the reason we didn't focus on teachers is that we consider, at least in the 3 countries in Latin America, and the 3 Latin American countries, that to give advice for, to students on what subjects to take, although we could create a dashboard that it could automatically tell you, depending on the subject that you take, your grade. There are other aspects that maybe students would not take into consideration. So that's why they need the guide of a teacher's guide to make better decisions. So even though we could create a perfect dashboard with all the needs, we still consider that teachers, at least at this first moment, they still need to guide students. So later on, then we will build maybe now a student dashboard that would help students, and then based on the results, when they have the conversation with the counselor, they would make better decisions. So that's why we decided to focus on that. And yes, we could have made something at a subject level, maybe a dashboard that, based on how the student is doing, if we could provide feedback, we could have done it in different ways, because that need was very general. They need timely feedback. How does timely feedback look like? It depends. It could look like on a dashboard at a course level, or a dashboard at at the whole program level. But we decided to frame it as an academic counseling one. That was the first question, Isabel.
Yes, and regarding the second, is there any evaluation that you plan to do in order to see how this improves certain academic outcomes, such as persistence from the perspective of students or better grades? Have you thought any follow-up initiative in order to see how the use of the dashboard helps students?
Yes, we're trying to see a long-term impact if we see some improvement in learning performance. I mean, we want to avoid a dropout, actually, because again, one of the issues that we have, especially in sport, is that students take too many subjects, and then because they are not aware of their workload, the workload, then they drop out. I mean, they fail because it's just too much for them. So we want to see on the long term. It's difficult to see from one semester to another, but then maybe after implementing this, maybe 1 or 2 years in the different semesters, maybe we should be able to see, or we would like to see, if there is some effect on dropout. I mean, the dropout rate decreases.
Great. Thank you, Margarita. I think I don't see more questions, only, good comments about the webinar and the insightful presentation that you did. And
there are some questions now in the Q&A, but I think we're running out of time to answer them.
It's true.
So maybe it's good to round up. Thanks again, Margarita, for joining us. It was very insightful, and I think from the comments, we can also see that people really liked it. So we will post the video, the slides, and the ask questions on the webinar website. I posted the link to that already in the chat. So look to that website where we will post all of that. And we will, of course, hope you will join us for the next webinar, which will be a special panel session on rigor in learning analytics research, which will be in 2 months. Rita, you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you everyone for joining. This was a really great session, and I personally learned a lot, and we also in my institution are trying to develop some similar things. So this is really great. And yes, as Anushka and mentioned, we're going to have a next one in 2 months. Stay in touch on Eventbrite. You can follow our page when we're going to have all of the new webinars, and also there is a solar newsletter on solarresearch.org website. And that's where you can, sign up for a newsletter, and you see all other information for the things we do. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, Margarita, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.